Well, I'm excited today, guys. We have Tony Martignetti here from the Nonprofit Radio podcast, as I know him from, and he's been helping nonprofits with fundraising and all kinds of things since 1997. Is that right, Tony?
Yeah, it is.
Wow. So he's an expert on planned giving, and this is something that I have a lot to learn about. I know a lot of our audience is interested in learning more about. So I asked him today if he would just share some of his expertise. And so we're going to ask a few questions and learn a lot in a few minutes. So Tony, thanks for joining here today. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, Jesse. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to a good convo about planned giving.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I mean, let's just start out by making sure we understand what planned giving is exactly. And so as we frame this conversation, how would you define that to make sure we're on the same page?
Yeah. These are long-term gifts to charities. The easiest example is a gift in somebody's will. You think about somebody putting your charity in their will. That's not going to be cash to you until that donor dies. And that's typical of most planned gifts. It's that long-term.
Right.
So yeah, you need to have a long-term view of planned giving. I help a lot of boards manage that expectation. It's not going to be money that will fund next year's capital plan or, 5-year salary budget or anything like that. So it's long-term gifts to nonprofits, usually cash at the donor's death.
Okay. So just for my knowledge, beyond cash at donor's death, what's another example of something that might be considered planned gift, or is that pretty much all planned gift is kind of after death?
No, there are others. That's most of them, but a good example of a planned gift, I think, is the IRA rollover, which the technical name is the qualified charitable distribution, but people call it a rollover. Anybody 70 and a half and over can make a direct gift from their IRA to your charity, and that's dollars today. And I've helped a lot of clients be successful with those.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so maybe someone's listening to this, a nonprofit, and as you know, a lot of them are thinking, man, I'm just trying to make sure and have enough funds for this year, hit this year's budget. They're operating in that mentality, or maybe they're wondering, maybe they're not in that urgent of a state, but they're thinking, we're pretty small, medium-sized nonprofit. Is planned giving something that's really worth our investment? What would you say to someone like that? And is it for every nonprofit? Is it the right strategy and investment for everyone, or a certain type of nonprofit?
Yeah, I think once you're more than 5 years old, then I think you're ready to start planned giving. You're ready to think about it. And the other thing you need is, you need to have individual donors. So if you're strictly funded or mostly funded by grants, fees for services, maybe government agencies, then planned giving isn't going to work. So you need to have a decent number of donors, and they need to be the right age. Roughly 55 to 60 and over. That's the population I look for in clients and potential clients embarking on a planned giving program. If you've got those things in place, you're good to go. I mean, I worked with a nonprofit that had literally one employee. He was the executive director. Their budget was about $250,000 a year. And we put some things in place, looked at their constituents, who the potential donors were. We did some marketing and promotion together, email, direct mail, and they've now got a nice recognition society for planned giving with over a dozen people in it. And that's a good start for a one-person organization.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. So, okay. So if someone feels like they fit that, they've been around for 5 years or more, they've got some donors at that age range, but they don't really know much about how to go about that conversation. Sometimes there's, I think, maybe some misunderstanding, or just people just think it's too complicated to get into the planned giving space. Does it have to be, or is it really that complicated? And how would you encourage someone like that to think about getting started in that space?
You're right, Jesse, when you say that there's some I would call it intimidation,
Mm-hmm.
around planned giving. Some misgivings about, maybe we don't have enough technical expertise. I don't want to talk about people. I don't want to talk to donors about their death.
Yeah.
So we need to get rid of these, dispel these misconceptions.
Right.
You're not talking about a donor's death. You're talking about their long-term plan. You're talking to people who have been loyal supporters for many years. And if they're the right age, like I was talking about, they're ready to have a conversation about whether you can be a part of their long-term plan, their estate and retirement plan. So you're not talking about people's death. You don't need a lot of expertise. I've worked with nonprofits that one I mentioned, just one employee, that was a historical society. I've worked with a lot of organizations that small and a little bigger, but they didn't have expertise. But I was able to get them started. You don't have to have lawyers on the board. You don't have to have fancy publications. There's a lot you can do with simple marketing promotion, with the right kind of messaging, appropriate messaging, because it is a serious subject. But again, it's not a death subject. So with the right kind of messaging, you can be successful in planned giving. Don't be intimidated by this, what a lot of people consider a black box. It's not like that at all.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. Well, what would you encourage someone, how can they kind of take a first step toward that? What's a simple way to get started in that space? Is it just similar to major kind of donor engagement where you're just sitting down with someone typically and asking them to consider this type of gift, or is there some things that need to be in place first before you have those conversations? What's kind of the first action item if someone thinks that if a nonprofit thinks this is something they want to start investing in?
You need to look at your constituents to see who the potential donors are, long-term donors, the right age, and they need to be engaged. Hopefully you've been talking to these people, and you probably have, because they're loyal donors. If you have the right kind of relationships in place, and that doesn't mean that you're talking to them every week or every month. I'm not suggesting that, but they need to be engaged. They need to feel close to the organization. A little more than just they write a check once a year.
Right.
So you get those things in place. You get those relationships set. Then you can start. Email marketing. I like to do a lot of direct mail for clients. I have a bigger client, a college that I've been working with for a bunch of years. We've been very successful around direct mail for bequests, and typically that's the gift where you start. And then if you want to, you can go beyond bequests, but you don't have to. You can have a very respectable planned giving program that is mostly or all bequests, those gifts in people's wills.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Okay. So I've heard that, from other experts that, it's one of the best opportunities for a really high ROI for a nonprofit to be investing in this space, because I guess because the gifts can be so large at times. Now, Obviously the timeline is the other factor that some people don't get as excited about gifts, that, you don't know when they're coming. You can't exactly plan for them. But I think the return on that investment for the long-term health of the organization, investment in the nonprofit can be really significant.
Yeah, the average charitable bequest in the U.S. is around $37,000. The smallest gift I've ever seen in a will, and again, there are other types of gifts you can talk about, but we're talking about getting started. Mm-hmm. So the bequests, the smallest one I've ever seen is $1,000, and that's rare. I mean, I've just seen a handful of those since doing this in 1997. If endowment is important to you, if you want to grow your endowment or start your endowment, planned giving is a very good way to do that. The reason is a lot of gifts and again the bequests are unrestricted, and I'm always encouraging my clients to put as much of that unrestricted money into endowment as possible. I know that's hard, and I know it's a balance. You have immediate needs, you got midterm needs, but I encourage clients to think about the long-term needs also, and to put as much of that unrestricted money that we get into endowment. So if your board has been talking about endowment, or if you feel you're not sustainable the way you'd like to be, endowment, building it or growing it, or I could say creating it or growing it, is an important place to start.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that's great. Any final thoughts for someone who's wanting to get in this space? I mean, I would love, I mean, how can they, I'm assuming you would invite them to reach out to you if they want to, if they need a partner in this, or what, any other final advice as we wrap up this kind of basic session on first steps that you'd give someone for planned giving?
First step is what I already said. Don't be intimidated. You don't have to be, even a mid-size. You shouldn't have to be a large organization. You don't even have to be mid-size. You can be a small organization and be successful with planned giving. There are a lot of resources. You can go to TonyMartignetti.com. I talk a lot about planned giving. Nonprofit Radio, my podcast. You can also get info about that. Same site, TonyMartignetti.com. Conferences, conferences can be valuable. The only thing I would caution you about learning about planned giving in conferences is don't go to the ones where there's an attorney who's a speaker, right? I am an attorney, but I don't explain like one. I don't think like one. I don't practice law any longer. I mean, I'm strictly planned giving, strategic advisor to nonprofits. But there are a lot of attorney speakers, and the odds are they're going to be talking over your head. So don't go to those speakers. Seek out the other people, who are the non-attorney speakers. And I'm always happy to answer questions too.
Okay, that's great. Oh man. Well, one last question, I guess. Are you gonna go over to that beach later after this call?
Yeah, enjoy the wave. I was there yesterday afternoon. Yeah. Okay. I can't go every day, but I like to go every couple of days. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm coming from Emerald Isle, North Carolina, and that's the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful.
The beach is just across the street.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I know Bentonville, Arkansas is very nice, but
it is, yeah. But these beautiful views here.
I am sorry it's landlocked.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, me too.
You're welcome to come out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll have to plan that. Well, thank you, Tony. As you mentioned, you should definitely check out the podcast. I've found it to be really helpful and fun to listen to. The website's got a lot of good resources as well.
Yeah, so, and we're going to be getting the Pure Charity CEO Mike on the show, probably October. Looks like it'll be October. Yeah.
I'm excited. So Mike Rush, our CEO, is going to be talking about the state of good and hanging out with Tony to chat about that on the podcast. Yeah. So that'll be
that's a very important report. We'll be talking about it. Yeah. So join us. We got 13,000 listeners each week. Come on board.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Tony. I enjoyed it. I appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
All right, Jesse. Thank you very much for having me.